25 men, one woman, one night. In the filth-soaked underbelly of ancient Rome, beneath flickering oil lamps and the heavy scent of sweat, a contest was unfolding that no historian could ever truly explain. The woman at its center was not a courtesan or a slave. She was the Empress of Rome, the wife of its ruler, and one of the most powerful women on earth. Her name was Valeria Messalina. That night, she would challenge the city's most famous prostitute to an impossible competition. Who could pleasure more men before dawn? No money was at stake, no title. Only the primal need to prove something, perhaps to herself, perhaps to a world that had denied her power in every other form. What she did that night would echo for 2,000 years, but before the scandal, before the fall, before the legends were twisted and magnified by her enemies, there was a girl, a young Roman noble whose destiny was decided long before she could speak against it. The year is 38 CE, and Rome glitters like a marble jewel beneath the Mediterranean sun. White temples glisten, senators argue in echoing halls, and slaves hurry through the streets, carrying the burdens of an empire. But inside the palace walls, beneath the golden ceilings and marble columns, something rancid festers. The Emperor Caligula rules with paranoia and cruelty. Executions are so frequent that senators flinch at every footstep. In the quieter corners of the palace lives a man few take seriously, Claudius, Caligula's uncle. At 47, Claudius is awkward, limping, and stammers when he speaks. His family mocks him behind his back, calling him a fool, a half-wit, a man unfit for politics. But this idiot will soon outlive them all. Across the city, in a luxurious villa surrounded by gardens and mosaics, lives 15-year-old Valeria Messalina, a descendant of Augustus's own bloodline. Ancient chroniclers describe her with reverence: dark hair, pale skin, sharp intelligence. Yet it wasn't her beauty that unsettled people. It was her presence. Her gaze could slice through pretense. Her silence could feel like judgment. But in Rome, beauty and brilliance meant little for a young woman. What mattered was alliance, power, bloodlines. And one day, without her consent, Messalina was told she would marry the awkward, drooling uncle nobody respected, Claudius. A teenager forced to wed a man 3 decades older, with no say, no choice, no escape. Her wedding night, historians note delicately, fulfilled her duty. What they mean is that Rome never cared about her consent. Then, everything changed. In 41 CE, Caligula was murdered by his own guards. Chaos rippled through the empire. Soldiers stormed the palace searching for survivors and found Claudius hiding behind a curtain, trembling. On a whim, they lifted him up and declared him emperor. And just like that, the man everyone dismissed as useless now ruled the greatest empire on earth. Messalina, barely 18, became Empress of Rome. But Rome's throne was a double-edged sword. Power came wrapped in danger. To survive, she would have to play a role. Dutiful wife, loyal mother, quiet beauty, and she played it well. During the day, she smiled beside Claudius at ceremonies. At night, she began slipping into the streets disguised in a blonde wig, vanishing into the red light district known as the Subura. There, amid the shadows and whispers, the Empress of Rome took a false name, Lysiska, the she-wolf. And in a tiny cell reeking of wine and lust, she became a prostitute by choice. She paid the brothel owner for the room. Men came and went, unaware they were with the woman who slept beside the emperor. Sometimes she charged a coin, sometimes nothing at all. It wasn't about money, it was about control. In a life where everything was dictated for her, husband, title, behavior, this was the one space where she decided: her body, her rules, her power. Historians and psychologists centuries later would argue endlessly about why she did it. Some call it rebellion, others madness. But one thing is certain: Messalina was unlike any woman Rome had ever seen. By day, she was marble perfection, smiling at the Senate beside her husband. By night, she dissolved into Rome's underworld, searching for something even she couldn't name. Rumors spread like wildfire. The guards whispered, servants gossiped, but no one dared confront her. Who would accuse the Empress of debauchery and live to tell it? Still, her appetite for danger grew. Soon she wasn't satisfied by secret trysts. She began throwing parties, lavish, obscene gatherings in the imperial gardens. Senators and their wives received gilded invitations they couldn't refuse. Behind closed doors, the Empress of Rome transformed these parties into performances of power and pleasure. Guests were ordered to indulge in front of one another, their reputations chained to her by shame. It was genius in a monstrous sort of way. Every powerful man in Rome became her accomplice. Every general, every senator who wanted her favor had dirt on his own hands. If they betrayed her, she could ruin them. And so the empire's elite danced willingly into her trap. Claudius, meanwhile, either didn't know or didn't want to know. The emperor buried himself in administration, content to let his wife entertain. But two of his freedmen, former slaves who wielded enormous influence, watched everything. Their names were Narcissus and Pallas, and they understood exactly what was happening. They knew this could destroy the empire. They just had to wait for the perfect moment to strike. That moment would come sooner than anyone expected, when the Empress of Rome challenged a prostitute to a contest that would make her infamous for eternity. It began, according to Pliny the Elder, with a wager whispered in the dark. Messalina, disguised once again as her alter ego Lysiska, stood face to face with Rome's most renowned courtesan, a woman named Sylla, whose beauty was said to have bankrupted senators and generals alike. The challenge was simple, brutal, and obscene. Who could bed more men before the sun rose again? One was an empress, the other a prostitute. But in this room, titles meant nothing. Only endurance did. The numbers vary depending on the chronicler. Some say 25, others claim even more. But the result, all sources agree on. Messalina won. She outlasted Sylla, still demanding more when her rival collapsed in exhaustion. Think about that. 25 men in a single day, no rest, no food, no sleep. Biologically, it borders on impossible, yet this story appears across multiple independent accounts, Tacitus, Suetonius, Juvenal, all writing within decades of her death. Did it truly happen that way? Probably not exactly, but it didn't need to. The fact that Rome believed it says everything. To the Romans, the story symbolized something monstrous, a woman whose hunger, physical or otherwise, knew no limits. To modern minds, it reveals something far more tragic, a young woman spiraling through isolation, control, and compulsive behavior in a world that gave her no voice. Imagine the psychology. The empress of the world's mightiest empire with everything, wealth, luxury, servants, children, and yet utterly powerless over her own existence. She couldn't choose her husband, her public image, or even her future. Perhaps this was her rebellion, perhaps the only rebellion available. Ancient Roman medicine, of course, had no understanding of mental health. They called such impulses female hysteria, claiming they came from a restless womb. A Roman physician might have offered her herbs or amulets, never realizing the pain beneath the surface, a woman addicted not to sex, but to control. But in the palace, the mask was cracking. Too many had seen too much. The whispers grew into rumors and the rumors into scandal. Claudius somehow remained blind, or maybe he chose to be. Narcissus and Pallas were not blind. They watched, they gathered information, they waited. They knew Messalina's downfall was inevitable. All they needed was her to make one colossal mistake. And she did. In 48 CE, the Empress of Rome fell in love. Not with her husband, not with her nameless nighttime lovers, but with a man named Gaius Silius, a senator famed for his beauty and charm. Their affair was hardly a secret, but then Messalina did something so unthinkable that even her enemies thought it was rumor. She married him, publicly, while still married to the emperor. The wedding wasn't a drunken tryst or secret ritual. It was a full ceremony with priests, witnesses, music, and feasting, held in her own gardens. Senators attended, nobles toasted. The Empress of Rome walked down the aisle beside another man, while Claudius was away from the city. Why? Historians have debated this for centuries. Some say she had gone mad, completely detached from reality after years of unchecked indulgence. Others argue it was a political coup. that she meant to replace Claudius with Silius as emperor. Either way, it was suicide. Imagine being a Roman senator receiving that wedding invitation. Refuse to attend, and you insult the Empress. Attend, and you become a witness to treason. There was no safe choice. The wedding stretched into the night with laughter, dancing, and wine, the crowd pretending not to feel the dread creeping in. Messalina, radiant in her bridal attire, believed she had conquered fate itself. Then word reached Claudius. He was at the port of Ostia, overseeing grain shipments, when reports arrived that his wife had married another man in a full ceremony. At first he laughed, thinking it a cruel rumor. It took signed contracts and sworn testimonies to convince him. When he finally understood, his face went cold. Narcissus knew this was his moment. If he hesitated, Rome could fall into civil war. So he took control, seizing the Praetorian Guard, rallying loyal soldiers, and marching straight for the capital. Back in Rome, Messalina kept celebrating, oblivious to the army moving toward her. Then came the knock at the door. The news hit like a thunderclap. Claudius knew everything. He was coming, and he was bringing the guard. The Empress froze. The wine's warmth drained from her body. She realized finally that the game was over. In panic, she gathered her children, Britannicus and Octavia, hoping their innocent faces might soften Claudius's rage. It had worked before. Tears, charm, beauty. These had always been her weapons. But not this time. Narcissus, knowing her power to manipulate, intercepted her. He forbade the emperor from seeing her, warning that one look would break his resolve. And so, as Claudius returned to Rome, Messalina was cut off, alone, desperate, and awaiting judgment. Her lover Silius was executed the same day. The guests who had attended the wedding were hunted down one by one. Some slit their own wrists before soldiers could reach them. Others begged for mercy that never came. Messalina fled to the gardens of Lucullus, a grand estate she had stolen years earlier through deceit. How bitterly fitting that it would now become her tomb. There, with her mother beside her, she waited, her mind fractured, swinging from rage to terror to eerie calm. She tried to write a plea to her husband, but couldn't finish it. She thought of suicide, but couldn't bring herself to do it. When the soldiers arrived, they offered her one last mercy, die by her own hand. But she couldn't. Her mother urged her to do it, whispering that it was the only way to die with dignity. Messalina hesitated, trembling, paralyzed by fear. The centurion grew impatient. His sword flashed once, and just like that, the Empress of Rome was gone. 22 years old. The woman who had ruled the world's greatest empire by day and prowled its brothels by night now lay lifeless in the garden she had stolen. When news reached Claudius, he was dining. According to ancient sources, he neither cried nor smiled. He simply took another bite, called for more wine, and carried on. But history did not carry on. It remembered her. It turned her name into legend, her desires into crimes, her rebellion into madness. What came next would reshape the empire and reveal the shocking truth about how power, politics, and propaganda built the myth of Rome's most scandalous empress. Because the story of Messalina doesn't end with her death, it begins with the lies told afterward. The night of Rome's most forbidden festival began under a bruised sky. Torches burned like veins of fire across the marble streets, and the scent of incense could barely mask the stench of wine, sweat, and sin. At its center, Messalina's villa. The Empress of Rome had turned her private gardens into a stage of ruinous pleasure. Naked statues glistened under lamplight, servants scattered rose petals soaked in oil, and musicians played obscene tunes meant to drown out conscience itself. But tonight wasn't ordinary decadence. It was a competition, a grotesque game that Rome's whispers would immortalize for centuries. Messalina had summoned the empire's most notorious courtesans and declared a challenge. Let us see who can please the most men before dawn. The courtesans giggled in disbelief, but none dared refuse the empress. Among them stood Scylla, a famed harlot from Alexandria, lean and dark-eyed. She had heard of Messalina's appetite and was determined to defend her own legend. The doors were sealed, Wine flowed, and the men, soldiers, nobles, even slaves, were brought in, trembling with lust and fear. Hour after hour, the contest raged. Bodies collapsed, servants fainted, and the air turned thick with heat and delirium. By morning, only Messalina still stood, trembling, pale, eyes hollow, but triumphant. She had conquered 25 men in one night. Sylla lay unconscious. The Empress laughed like a goddess drenched in victory and madness. Rome would whisper of this for generations, and Claudius, her husband, the emperor, would remain oblivious, cocooned in his marble halls, believing his young wife still an innocent flower. But power, once tasted through flesh, becomes an addiction. Messalina's hunger now turned toward domination. She began selling imperial positions to her lovers, land, titles, even senatorial seats, all traded for her favor. Those who refused her advances vanished mysteriously, found strangled or poisoned. When Claudius left Rome for state business, she ruled as if the throne were hers. She signed decrees, collected taxes, and flaunted her jewels in open daylight. Her villa became a second palace, filled with laughter, moans, and the sound of music echoing through its corridors. But within those walls, horror bred. Captured slaves were forced to perform unspeakable acts. Noble women were stripped of their dignity for sport, and every pleasure became more violent, more desperate. Even her attendants began to fear her. They whispered she had been touched by a demon of lust, that her eyes glowed under moonlight, that she no longer felt human pain. Yet beneath that madness lay something darker, a need to be seen, to defy the men who ruled her world. In every forbidden act, Messalina screamed silently against the chains of a patriarchal empire. But rebellion built on sin only burns its wielder. It was a warm autumn morning when the prophecy of her ruin began to unfold. Claudius had returned to Rome, weary and unsuspecting, his heart still blind with affection. Messalina, however, had grown reckless beyond redemption. She fell in love, or believed she did, with Gaius Silius, Rome's most handsome nobleman. Their affair was no secret. They walked the streets together, hand in hand, like emperor and empress. Then came her greatest folly. In a fever of passion, she married Silius in a public ceremony, while still legally wed to Claudius, the emperor of Rome. Guests laughed nervously, thinking it a jest. But Messalina was deadly serious. She dressed in white silk, her golden hair crowned with roses, her eyes blazing like molten amber. The ceremony ended in feasting, drunken songs, and wild dances. When word reached Claudius, he thought it impossible. His freedman Narcissus had to show him the witnesses, trembling senators who confirmed the truth. "Messalina has taken another husband," Narcissus whispered. "She means to take your throne next." The emperor's face turned pale. For the first time, Claudius saw through the illusion. He ordered an armed detachment to seize Silius and Messalina. When soldiers stormed the villa, they found chaos, shattered goblets, silk garments scattered, the remnants of a mad celebration. Silius was dragged away, silent and resigned. Messalina fled barefoot through the gardens, her robe torn, her hair wild, crying out for mercy. She tried to reach Claudius, believing her beauty could still save her. But Narcissus barred the gates. He feared her charm even in ruin. Claudius hesitated, trembling. Part of him wanted to forgive her, to believe she was misled. But Narcissus whispered again, "If she lives, she will rise again." And so the emperor gave no command to save her. Messalina was taken to the gardens of Lucullus, the very gardens where she had once ruled her orgies of pleasure. Now, surrounded by silence and fallen leaves, she sat trembling. An officer handed her a dagger. She stared at it for a long moment. When her trembling hands failed to act, a soldier stepped forward and drove the blade into her side. The woman who had ruled Rome's flesh, who had conquered men, titles, and hearts, died gasping like a mortal, her golden hair soaking in blood. The city fell silent. Messalina's name was erased from monuments, her images smashed, her memory condemned. But the whispers never died. Even today her legend lingers, as both a warning and a fascination. To some she was the devil in silk, a symbol of lust unbound. To others, a woman crushed by the hypocrisy of men who feared her power. And in the shadows of ancient Rome, where marble ruins remember everything, the echo of her laughter still haunts the night, half pleasure, half pain, the eternal cry of Messalina, the Scarlet Empress of Rome.